Hello, my name's Darren Harris. I am the patron of the Child Eye Cancer Trust. I'm also a double Paralympian England's most capped blind footballer. I'm a best-selling author. I'm an honorary doctorate, non-executive director of a charity and a few other roles. So you could say that I've been relatively successful in my life. I suppose what I really want to show you today is how retinoblastoma has affected me. And there's a number of ways in which that's the case. So the first is that I am an adult survivor of retinoblastoma. The second is that I am a parent of a child who has bilateral retinoblastoma. And what I suppose I want to focus on today is how it affected me growing up. So like most of you, I was born with normal vision, but when I was 15 months old, I was diagnosed with cancer in both my eyes. At first, when I went to the Royal Eye Infirmary, my mum obviously noticed the reddening of my eye, and she took me down to see the consultant that had no idea what it was. And in the end, I got sent to Harley Street in London, and it was there where I was formally diagnosed. And they suggested removing both my eyes. At the time, my granddad couldn't really imagine what life being totally blind would be like, and so he begged for them to keep one of my eyes. So in the end, my left eye was removed and my right eye was treated with radiotherapy. We didn't know back then what the long-term effects of radiotherapy was. And so I suppose for those first few years of my life, I lived a pretty normal childhood. And I was able to see reasonably well from one eye. I could still see print and things like that and still get around on my own. And so I had a pretty normal childhood going to a mainstream primary school. But as I kind of got older and as I sort of moved towards the end of my primary education, it was clear that my sight was getting gradually worse and worse and worse. And in fact, my teachers started preparing me for life without sight even before I realised. So I began to learn to touch type, began to learn how to use Braille before I actually needed it. But it definitely affected me emotionally, mentally and socially. So emotionally it affected me because I'd get frustrated when I couldn't do things for myself. It could be been on a football pitch or we'd be playing rounders and I'd drop the ball because when you can only see out of one eye, it's really hard to judge distances and be as coordinated as you might be. I used to get angry just because of my situation and also when people, left things in the way. But I was also kind of had this sense of hopelessness because I used to go to the doctors every single year expecting some miracle cure because let's be honest, they've been able to put a man on the moon, they've been able to do all sorts of things. Why on earth couldn't they fix my eyes? And so I used to see this doctor and he'd put this ultrasound gel in my eye and he'd say, look up, look down, look left, look right. And then at the end of the consultation, he'd say, Darren, your sight's getting worse and there's nothing we can do about it. And that left me in a dark place, literally, metaphorically. And I suppose also, it affected me mentally because I didn't really know what a future would look like. I didn't know any other blind people. I didn't have any friends who were blind. I didn't have any family members who were blind. And there weren't the sort of role models that we see today that were blind. Obviously, I'd heard of Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles, but that was pretty much it in terms of kind of blind people who were doing anything amazing with their lives. And so, yes, I really didn't know what that future would hold for me. I used to think that, I'd never be able to drive. I'd never have a family. I'd never get a good job. And so all of those doubts, used to sort of occupy my mind. And then socially, it started to affect me as well because people started to, tease me and bully me because of how my eye looked. And that was certainly an experience I had quite a lot. People would call me Cyclops or One-Eye Jack or all these sorts of names, because the appearance of my eye, because of the radiotherapy and because it had destroyed the tear duct in my eye, basically meant that the state of my cornea and iris sort of degenerated gradually over that period of time. In fact, there's one traumatic story which I tell quite often when I go into schools, and it was when I went to visit one of my family members. My mum took me to see my uncle and my aunt, and my little cousins were there. And one of my little cousins was 5 years old at the time, and she'd never seen my eye before. And when she saw it, she was so horrified that she literally ran into the corner. It was like a scene from Doctor Who. She was just lying behind the sofa crying. And what I remember from that day was that all of the adults went to comfort her and none of them came to me. And it was this really traumatic experience which, lasted quite a long time and gave me a dilemma which I never really solved. And that dilemma was that if I wore my dark glasses, then it stopped people from being able to see my eye. But if I wore those glasses, it also meant that when I was walking around, I wasn't able to see as well as I would without those glasses. And so that was a dilemma that I kind of faced every single day and had to kind of think about what was the best thing for me on that particular occasion. And certainly whenever I was in sort of public facing moments, whenever I sit on a bus or sit on a train or go to a restaurant, I'd always be conscious of where I sat on that train or bus or cafe, and make sure that I had a window seat so I could, gaze into the distance as if it were looking at the rolling hills or the cows and the sheep, and make sure that people didn't actually see my eye, or at least they'd only see my false eye, which looked normal to them. And I know, reading some of the comments that I see on some of the Facebook groups, that is something that a lot of people are conscious of, is that cosmetic appearance of their eye. And I think that can have a real impact on people's confidence in terms of mixing in social situations. So I think our teenage years are perhaps some of the most difficult times of our lives. There are hormonal changes which are going on, but it's also a time of our lives when we start to mix outside of our sort of family groups and into our sort of peer groups. And so that's the point at which we start to become more conscious of ourselves. And so I really wanted to kind of offer this video as support to all the people kind of going through those teenage years and thinking about, what it must be like. And I think it's worth, showing you what my eye actually looks like, because, and it's all a matter of scale, isn't it? Because actually those people who had radiotherapy before my time would have probably had much more discoloring of their eye or facial disfiguration because of the treatment they had. But this is actually what my eye looks like. This is my right eye, which has, as I said, had radiotherapy and is kind of severely scarred because of it. So that's the reality that we have to deal with. And I think there's only really sort of a few ways that we can deal with this kind of going forwards. I think firstly, we still need to continue all the research, especially around the sort of genetic side, and finding out about, what we can do about RB1 in terms of its effects on that chromosome. There's also the work that we can do for early diagnosis and making sure that all of the kind of healthcare practitioners who come into contact with children make sure that they notice the signs of retinoblastoma early. But I think finally and most importantly for all of us is that we continue to support one another and be there to help each other through those sort of challenging situations. So I'm always available if anyone's got any questions, if anyone wants to run anything by me. But I really hope that we work together and make sure that retinoblastoma doesn't become a life-limiting condition for you. Thanks very much, guys.